Good morning and welcome to Global Dialogues. I'm your host, Baldomero Lago, and today we welcome former Foreign Service Officer and Regional Director of the Office of Foreign Missions in Los Angeles, or I would say Madame Christina Hernandez. During this session, feel free to ask questions in the Facebook comments window. If time permits, I will address the select few. Let me introduce, as a brief introduction, let me introduce our friend, Christina Hernandez. She likes her friends to call her CJ, so I'm going to take that opportunity to address her as or Mrs. or Madame Hernandez or CJ, whatever comes out of my mouth. But anyhow, Christina, she is an incredible individual, a wonderful friend, and after all, she's a native of Utah and recently retired from the Foreign Service as a Foreign Service Officer and specialized in operational management services, human rights, and consular programs. She has served in Los Angeles, California, Merida in Mexico, Washington, D.C., in Budapest, Hungary, and in Mexico City, again in Mexico. Prior to joining the Foreign Service, CJ managed major acquisitions and public-private partnerships for the U.S. Air Force at Hill Air Force Base and at the Defense Logistics Agency in Germany, as well as in Italy. Madame Hernandez holds a master's degree in human resource management from Utah State University and a bachelor's degree in communications from Imperial University, Weber State University. We are so grateful to have Christina with us today, and we welcome you, CJ, to our program. How are you today?
It's a pleasure to be with you all.
Thank you very much. Christina, what a wonderful career you have had, both at the Department of State and then working at other agencies for the government. And I have been able to work with you for the past years as we have hosted the diplomatic conference at UVU, and now we are in a few boards together. And it's remarkable the trajectory that you have done. But let's begin by asking you a basic question. What has it been like to work for the U.S. Department of State, especially in your role as Director of the Office of Foreign Missions? You have to handle and deal with all those diplomats from everywhere across the globe. How's it been?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, first of all, Baldomero, it was a privilege of a lifetime to work for both the DOD and the Department of State. In particular, being a diplomat was a childhood dream of mine, and it was really great to be able to realize that and work with incredible people. What I learned is success in the Foreign Service, at least, depended upon your capacity for flexibility, gratitude, and optimism. I mean, you have to have the optimism that things are going to work out, that these moves are going to transpire, that your family's going to be okay. But most overseas positions are focused on bilateral relationships exclusively when you're serving in country. And while on domestic assignments in Washington, you mainly are dealing with regional concepts and some bilateral work. But I tell you what, I think my most interesting position, as you mentioned, was being the director of the Office of Foreign Missions in Los Angeles, covering 104 countries at the time, dealing with 4 or 5 different U.S. Western states, including California, Arizona, Nevada, and Utah, of course. The joy of that was not only working individually with each of the nations, but also working with local and state officials from these 4 states and relaying this information back to Washington. It was definitely a full plate. We worked a lot in training dignitaries that were serving in our country, things about crisis management. I mean, in California alone, we had wildfires, mass shootings, and then of course we all experienced the COVID chaos. We dealt a lot with bilateral reciprocity issues. One of the things that my staff was involved in was closing Russian consulates, particularly Seattle and San Francisco, as a bilateral issue. We also work on tax relief, spouse employment, property issues, driving privileges. We issue license plates and driver's license, and also duty-free customs. So hands are in a lot of different pots there. But what surprised me the most was serving our domestic constituents, building ties with local officials and law enforcement and businesses and educational institutes to manage incidences with diplomats and their nationals, letting them know what does that little card give them and when they're involved in an accident or deportations of their local nationals or welfare and whereabouts cases, and security, etc. So it was a great last assignment to have in the Foreign Service, serving domestically but dealing with so many countries, and it was such a privilege. And I got to meet the Utah Consular Corps and your organization as well, which is very involved in global issues.
Thank you. That's wow. It's amazing all the things, the portfolio that you had and to fulfill. So is remarkable. Would you mind sharing some highlights or some experiences that you have lived during your tenure in the U.S. Department of State?
Right. Diplomacy is really hard to visualize. I mean, unless you've seen Argo or Madam Secretary or some of those things, it's not quite as flashy as a lot of the DoD tanks and guns and F-35 movies that you've seen. But it's a quiet industry for the most part, but a lot of moving parts. Some of the things that I've personally been involved in is supporting lots of VIP visits, to include President of the United States visit to the North American Leaders Summit in Cancun, where he met this was President Bush Jr. I met with President Fox from Mexico and Prime Minister Harper. So that was really interesting to be involved in those meetings. Couple big Secretary of State visits during the Clinton administration to Hungary, and many congressional delegations. Congressional members often go to foreign countries if they're supporting programs in those areas, just to learn more about what's going on the ground. On the management side of things, I worked to purchase property for the US government in Hungary and Mexico, and managed to maintain and furnished 100 housing units. That was one of my portfolios. I thought that was kind of unique. Another occasion, I created a Roma fellowship for disadvantaged college graduate minorities in Hungary. That was very rewarding. I served as an international election observer in Hungary and Mexico during critical elections. And that was fascinating. By the numbers, as a consular officer for a year, two and a half years, I interviewed over 40,000 visa applicants and 10,000 passport seekers, which involved making quick decisions, sometimes within a 2-minute window, following up on fraud investigations, also doing prison visits to Americans who were incarcerated abroad. So that was like a social work experience. I also researched and drafted human rights policy papers, annual reports, and speeches to include trafficking in persons and working with victims of those instances and NGOs. That was very enlightening as well. When I was in LA, I created a women in diplomacy group with female consuls generals to encourage women to seek out careers in international affairs, which is very vital to have all voices at the table when talking about peace and security. An ongoing thing, which is what I'm doing right now too, is to lead outreach activities, talking with students, participating in panel discussions, interviews with local press, etc. So it's hard to say, this one thing was the best, because there was so many good parts to my experience. Each job was different.
And CJ, what challenges have you faced in your career or position? Before you answer this question, this week we're celebrating International Women's Week, and tomorrow I have a wonderful panel related to gender equality, and with 3 top outstanding leaders in the community. But have you faced some challenges, not only for being a woman in this position? I can imagine working in the Department of Defense, but also working in this world where sometimes women are not put up to the level or put up to the standards by some governments or some individuals. What challenges have you faced?
Well, there's the general joining the Foreign Service challenges, and that's like learning languages and cultures, and honestly never feeling at home. Even when you're back in the US, things change while you're gone, and your family changes, your nieces and nephews start using different words, and products are different, and you do have quite a culture shock coming back even for visits. That's been a challenge. This new job every 2 to 4 years, always moving and always looking for that next job, lobbying for the next job. moving your family around if you have family, and getting your kids in schools and activities to keep them engaged and feeling a part of the community. Then you have the bureaucracy of working in government, not only with your own government, but with the foreign governments you're dealing with, the bilateral relationship and how to manage that. And then there's the constant self-promotion, from writing yearly appraisals that we do to bidding our next job. It gets a little exhausting talking about how great you are, right? But it's part of the job. But and all of our colleagues do that. And your particular question about being a woman and the kind of filter that you see things through. And yes, I haven't served in the most challenging region, I think. I've pretty much stayed in Mexico, in Europe, but even in those cultures, there's a hierarchy and a gender preference for sure. Hungary in particular is quite old-fashioned. Men will still kiss your hand when they meet you. And as a diplomat, you have to kind of weigh the custom and the age of the person you're working with versus your diplomatic position. And, it's similar to what we see in our own society, where you sometimes have to repeat things, or you have to even be a little bit more prepared for whatever's coming at you, because typically you're not going to get the benefit of the doubt the first round, and you have to work on building that credibility. But overall, working in the Department of State as an organization, I felt very welcomed and very appreciated. And I know that this last orientation class in the fall of new officers, the women actually outnumbered the men, and this is the first class ever, so class of 2020. So things are changing, but there are challenges, and you have to be aware of that, and that's part of your background studies, language and culture studies before you go out to posting. They'll talk about those kind of things to help you better prepare for it.
It's interesting. During your career, I would imagine there has been several and different administrations, and sometimes you have to put the face of because you're representing a nation, you're representing a country, and you also have to represent a leader of the country. How has it been working under different administrations?
Yeah, great question. I like to break this down into three areas. There's leadership considerations, there's policy, and then there's priority. There's always, when an administration changes, there's always been a bit of holding the breath to see who's appointed to senior department positions, to include the secretary and the majority of assistant secretaries, and roughly 30% or more of all ambassadorships are usually political appointees in the Department of State. What's interesting is all ambassadors, either career ambassadors or political, must submit letters of resignation at the beginning of each new administration. And most career ambassadors do stay on to finish their tenure, usually 3 years, while the vast majority of the political appointees, as you can imagine, are asked to leave by the new administration. But what that does when you're in the field is that leaves huge gaps at post for up to a year sometimes in many cases. So although we have like a deputy chief of mission or second in command that fills in and is always a career person, but they usually aren't regarded as highly by the host nation as an ambassador is. So there's a little bit of shuffling things around while you wait for the new ambassador. The next thing is policy. The next concern is how U.S. foreign policy will change with the new administration and their priorities. Which area of the world will get more attention? What trade focuses will be highlighted? How do we treat allies and adversaries? During the Bush administration, we really, pivoted into energy sectors, while during the Obama administration, it was more as a pivot to Asia and trade agreements. And then, the way we treated or we worked with NATO allies and things like that, transformed dramatically during the Trump administration. So depending on where you are, where your posting is, when these policies and personalities come in, can catch you flat-footed sometimes. The priority too, number 3, some administrations are more globally savvy than others. how they prioritize their foreign policy equates to the funding and budget for people, facilities, and programs that we get. So it's huge. We could have a hiring freeze, as was happening during Secretary Tillerson's time with us. Then you have the plus ups, like during Colin Powell's time. We tripled the Foreign Service during his tenure. Personally, I've worked for 4 administrations while overseas, and each have their own ups and downs. The challenge is to, as an employee, to remain neutral and not express your personal opinion publicly, for sure. You are representing the United States government and whatever policies are in place. And you have to really do that while you're working, and then, you know, do your venting or your frustration at home or with your small circle of friends if you disagree with something. If you can't carry out a policy, then you should resign. And many of my friends had done that under different administrations. It just, the position they were in and the policy they were requested to support was against their personal beliefs, and so they went on to other things. Sorry, that's my puppy.
No. I bet it's difficult when you actually have this sentiment or belief in something, and you have to represent the opposite, right? So I think is very challenging. And you know, and this leads me to the next question. What have you learned about dealing with different people and different cultures?
Right. The thing that has helped me the most is I learned very quickly there's more than one way to do something. Once you leave your world, wherever you're from, county, city, state, country, and you go out and you say, oh, in Mexico, they, you know, do this. And in Hungary, they have dedicated bus lanes. And in, you know, there's all kinds of ways to solve the same issues that we face as humankind, if you will. I also learned through language training and meeting with different people around the world one-on-one that meanings are in people, not in the words that they use. That there is much more to communication than the word, the translation of the term you're using. It comes down to what are they really trying to tell me? And you use all of your facets of communication, right? All of your nonverbal skills and asking for feedback, because you could be missing the point completely. Another thing I learned is understand the hierarchy of a culture and respect it without compromising your values. This kind of comes back to a little bit of the question you asked about, you know, being a woman, representing the US government in foreign countries. And you have to understand what the culture is first, and respect it. But again, hold tight to your values. The other thing is these experiences make you hold a mirror up and see yourself and how you respond. I kind of treated each posting as an opportunity to recreate myself. You're coming there, nobody knows you, your staff doesn't know you, and anything that you wanted to fix or try new in a new place, whether it's an activity or hairstyle, whatever it is, you have a new beginning, you have a fresh start. So that was very exciting for me. But that's basically what I've learned so far.
That's great. I think you're giving an excellent background. And I know there will be some students viewing this program that they may be considering to have a career as a diplomat. And if someone wants to be one of them, what suggestions do you have for them?
Right. So I get this question, what should I major in? A whole lot from students. And I think it depends upon which area in the department you would like to work. So if you're looking to be a generalist like myself, I would recommend a strong liberal arts background and education. They're looking for strong communication skills, analytical writing, public speaking. You know, are you well read? Are you up on current events? Those that succeed in the Foreign Service as you get through your career seem to have very high, what they call emotional intelligence. This is kind of a new term for managing people with empathy, and removing yourself from the equation. Less about the ego and I, and more about seeing the bigger picture and what's motivating the people around you. I would also highly recommend serving an internship in Washington or at an embassy abroad. these opportunities are offered through the student programs section on the department's website. And it's not like I want to do a summer one, so I'm going to apply now. It's like you have to apply about a year out. But I've hired many interns. Most of these are non-paid, warning. But if you do go overseas, they do try to house you. But you get to see some really interesting things while you're on the clock, so to speak. I would start also by following the diplomat in residence for the Rocky Mountains. This person's based in Denver, Colorado, for Utah, if you're in Utah. This position's sole purpose is to provide updated information on recruitment opportunities of all stripes and to help with the Foreign Service test prep tips. So they're on Facebook. They often visit universities and college campuses as well. I don't know how that's going with COVID, but I would definitely check that out. And then finally, travel right now on your own dime, or if you could get a free trip somewhere, experience the world, because that is also what they're looking for, is that, do you have the flexibility? Is this really the right career for you? So that's my advice on that.
That is wonderful. And what I would imagine, maybe knowledge of a language. I didn't ask you, but after all the time you spent in Mexico, were you able to pick up some Spanish while you were there?
Right. So yeah, another great thing about the Foreign Service, if you don't know a language, they will teach it to you. I did have some Spanish coming into the department, and they test you, and then I had to take a little bit of a top up, professionalize it a little bit more, which was about 8 weeks long, and then you test you again before you go out to post. Hungarian, there's only 10 million speakers, I believe, worldwide of that language. So that was a slog to go, but you sit in class 5 hours a day, then you have 3 hours of homework, and that is your job for 6 to 9 months, is to learn only that language and that culture. You're paid to do so, and your travel expenses are covered in Virginia, and you have to test before you go out to post. So you're not required to have a language coming in. It could give you a few more points on the registry, especially if it's a hard language like Chinese, Arabic, or Russian. But if you don't know it, they will teach it to you.
Wow, that's great. So does that mean that the job doesn't come with an interpreter next to you, right?
Absolutely. And mostly no. You might luck out in some countries, but no, it will tell you if the position's language designated, and if it is, you have to reach that score.
Christina, you were in Los Angeles a year ago, serving as the director of foreign missions, and all of a sudden the world shut down due to this pandemic. How did that affect, until, if I recall, you retired at the end of the year? So you were there for, I would say, 8 months, 9 months, dealing with this whole department, dealing with 100 plus governments and consulates and representatives. And you still had to carry on the same way, the same torch, but now you're going to be confined somehow due to this pandemic. How was it?
Yeah, well, as like most offices, ours went completely remote in a matter of weeks on the onset. In fact, the first repatriation flight out of Wuhan came to March Air Force Base in California, and me and my team were part of the reception of our consular colleagues that were coming out of the country, and along with another 50 Americans. So yeah, we were kind of at the spear tip, to use a DoD term. But we were very busy with supporting foreign nationals, especially those that were on cruise ships that were docking in Los Angeles, Long Beach, and San Diego. Boy, that was chaotic mess. They didn't know where to go or what support or who was tested or not tested. And some of them, especially the crew members, were left on those ships for weeks at a time. And they were not able to get off and go home to the Philippines or India or wherever they were from. A very frustrating time. And the consulates kept reaching out to my office to put them in contact with, our colleagues at DHS and CDC. We tried to keep them informed, updated with County of Los Angeles in particular on health information and the restrictions. Also, some of their their nationals needed visa extensions because they were stuck in the US. They couldn't fly home, and the limited time they were given on their stay was coming to an end, and they didn't want to be out of status. So, I mean, it was left and right. Meantime, we're still processing, driver's licenses and license plates, having them mail them in. And it was quite interesting. My team was amazing, and they handled it with grace, but yeah, it was definitely challenging.
How interesting. Well, now you're back home, back in Utah, and hopefully relaxing a little bit after an amazing career. And I know you're facing your own neighborhood, and you look around, and I know you are beginning to become very involved in the community through different organizations, some boards, and so forth. And now you're beginning to experience the state of Utah, perhaps under some global lenses. How global do you feel that the state of Utah is in comparison to others?
Yeah, I haven't lived in a lot of states in the US, so it's hard for me to compare. I can compare, the Washington area with California because I was there, but I am so impressed with Utah's efforts. Just in my engagement over the last few years with the diplomatic conferences that you put on, with the consular corps here, with the governor's economic office, international diplomacy office, and World Trade Center. I mean, I'm thoroughly impressed, very excited about the future of Utah. There's many, many global NGOs here in Utah, and you also have, of course, the Utah Council for Citizen Diplomacy, which I'm proud to be a board member of, which works with exchanges through the State Department and many other global reaching programs. Of course, you have the universities here. You've got UVU, for instance, your office. University of Utah also has a MIAGE master's program, and Weber State also has an international focus. So the former Lieutenant Governor, now Governor Cox, often touts the language skills and dual enrollment programs offered in the state, which was very pleasantly surprising to me. In addition, Utah welcomes immigrants and refugees openly. There's so many programs of support here. So not only from an economic standpoint, I think from a humanitarian standpoint, Utah is head and shoulders above the majority of the United States.
And what can we do as a university to support the work that you folks do?
Oh, this is a great question. Thank you. What we really need help with is to build a domestic contingency. Tell our story. Diplomacy doesn't have fighter jets and tanks to show what we do. How the department supports Utahns in particular, you can find there's a state-by-state informational sheet on the Department of State's page of how we support each state, either through passport applications or exchanges or partnership agreements with universities in other countries. Tell the story. Encourage students to apply for internships and positions as well, and then include diplomacy into assignments. One of my colleagues, I'm actually in a retirement course right now, Carol Strichter, just published a book called Bombs, Bullets, and the Tank at the Office, Protecting America on Diplomacy Fronts. So reading about that, understanding what it is diplomacy does and how it protects us from getting into military engagements. It increases the trade opportunities we have, and also the goodwill between countries. Tell our story.
That is wonderful. Christina, I just want you to know that I'm going to be reviewing this video more than once because the wealth of knowledge and experience, the wisdom you have been able to share with us in in this past 30 minutes has been remarkable. And I hope that I can continue to carry on that torch to inspire and to activate the minds of some young students at the university, that they can be a support mechanism to the great work that all of you are doing. I know because I have seen it, how challenging it is and how difficult sometimes it may be, and and sometimes so rewarding for the great things that you folks do. So I do appreciate your experiences that you have shared today with us. And I want to thank you, honestly, for the opportunity that you have given us, to our students, as well as to our community, to share with all of us your career, which I think has been Wonderful. And I know that many boards throughout the community right now, I know you're associated to a couple of them that I'm well aware, will benefit from your experiences as well. We want to thank you, and we want to thank everyone that actually has been able to make sure that this event is being a success. We want to thank those that are following through the live feed and those that will be viewing it afterwards. For your information, tomorrow, Wednesday, we are actually, as I mentioned during the panel today, we will be celebrating or commemorating International Women's Week, or International Women's Day as well. And we will be reviewing panel or Sustainable Development Goal number 5 on gender equality. And we have 3 amazing panelists. We have Susan Matson, world leader on gender issues, as well as Tara Ivy. She is the director of the Women's Success Center. And Samira Harnish. Samira, she is the president and CEO of Women of the World. What 3 valuable individuals are planning to be with us tomorrow. So I encourage you tomorrow again at 11 o'clock, same time, same venue, to listen to what these 3 great leaders are going to tell us. To see a full schedule of our upcoming programs, Global Dialogues, and taking action, simply visit our website, uvu.edu/global. Next week, for your information, is a spring break, so we will resume after spring break some of these events, with the exception of tomorrow's panel. Again, Christina, thank you very much for your time and for sharing your thoughts. And as we sign off today, choose to be a global citizen. Have a wonderful day. Thank you to all.
Thank you, Baldomero.
Thank you.